As promised, I am back with part 2 of how to make your own memory quilt. Today it's going to be all about the interfacing. If you're unfamiliar, interfacing is going to be something that you iron on to the back of the clothing that you're putting in the quilt. It's just going to give the clothing some stability. Think about a t-shirt like this. You are getting quite a bit of stretch. And if you're trying to sew this next to something that is a bit more stiff, say like a pair of jeans or a 100% cotton shirt, when you go to sew those two clothing items together, because your feed dogs on the bottom of your sewing machine here are pulling that clothing item from underneath, you're going to get a different rate of stretch. And so what's going to happen is you're going to end up with a block where maybe this shirt is super stretched out and the cotton shirt that you sew it next to doesn't really stretch, and so it's just going to look all uneven and wonky and not at all what you want. So we're going to go ahead and interface our shirts today to put into our quilt, and I'm going to show you how. The first order of business is to buy yourself some interfacing. I personally like this Pellon 911 FF. It gives just the right amount of stability, but it's not super bulky. And so consequently, it's going to ensure that your quilts don't feel super stiff once you add it onto the clothing. My personal preference as far as technique is to cut my interfacing out in sheets. So the first thing I'm going to do is take one of the shirts and measure the logo. And it's measuring about 11 inches across and almost 9 inches in length. You can totally have blocks of different sizes, and I'll put an example of that here with a memory tree skirt that I made where the blocks were all different sizes. If you're a beginner and you haven't really done this before, it's a lot easier to keep your blocks all one size. That way you don't really have to think about the math and look for logos that are maybe smaller or accidentally miscut something. So for the purpose of this tutorial, we're just going to do square blocks all one size. So because my width was 11 inches, I'm going to cut this at 12 inches by 12 inches. That way I have a nice seam allowance all the way around the logo, about 1/2 inch to play with. Because you also want to make sure that you're cutting this big enough where part of your image doesn't get lost in your seam allowance. So because I'm going to cut this at 12 by 12, which means it's going to be 11.5 by 11.5 finished after it's sewn, I want to cut my interfacing even a little bit bigger than that, because what can happen if you don't cut your interfacing big enough, when you go to cut the actual shirt after you adhere your interfacing on, if even the edge of this doesn't have any interfacing, that edge is going to stretch when you go to sew it to something else. And that's the part that needs quite a bit of interfacing just so that it stays stable, so that you're getting nice quality seams. Definitely look at all of your clothes, kind of determine the largest block size that you'll need based on the logo and go from there. I'm going to be doing 13 by 13, and that's going to give me 1 inch to play with on each side. So there's my first piece of interfacing. There is a rough or bumpy side to this, and there's a smooth side to this. You're going to adhere the bumpy side to the wrong side of your fabric. Taking your shirt and laying it right side down. Look for where that logo is, because that's what you want to put in your quilt. Take that bumpy side and put it right on top of that logo. Make sure you're smoothing that shirt out because you don't want any wrinkles. Otherwise, it's going to be real wrinkly on your quilt and look kind of funky. Take a hot iron. If your iron has multiple settings, like mine does, you're going to put it on the cotton setting because that's a higher temperature. It's going to work well to adhere this. I like to start in the middle because then I can kind of smooth out any of these wrinkles as I go. One important note, you don't really want to drag like this because it can create wrinkles on the front side. Place your iron down for, I don't know, I probably do about 10 seconds in each spot, and then pick it up and move it to the spot next to it. Keep repeating this step until it's fully adhered to the back. Make sure that there's no kind of puckering or wrinkles or waviness. If there is and there's anything you need to fix, you can go ahead and iron from the front with one caveat. This shirt has kind of that vinyl. You do not want to put your iron directly on that because it will melt the image, melt to your iron, and your iron won't be very happy either. So you have these Teflon sheets pretty affordably from Amazon, and just lay it right on top of the logo and just kind of gently smooth it out, or make sure that it's really stuck down and adhering. If you don't have a Teflon sheet in a pinch, you could also use freezer paper. I'm going to cut this down. I need this to be 12 by 12. I am making sure that I am overlapping over here so that I have room to cut from this side too. I don't want my shirt to start here at 0 and make my first cut at 12, because then I don't have room to cut off from this side. Look and see my 12 and place my ruler. That puts me here. So I'm already cutting off part of my logo. So I know I need to scoot this down more. Not cutting into my logo. Now I want to make sure I have at least 1/4 of an inch seam allowance and be right at the point of that star. So that's perfect. I'm going to go ahead and make my cut. And this time I'm going to start it at 0 because I've already cut off this side. So I've cut it on the horizontal. Now I just need to cut it lengthwise. All right, and there's our first block for our memory quilt. Flip it over, make sure that your interfacing goes across the entire square all the way up to the edges. If it does not, if you're missing like a little strip of interfacing here, if you didn't cut enough, take just a little piece, or if you have like a little scrap, and go ahead and iron that on. Repeat that process for the number of blocks that you're going to create, and come back and see me, and I will show you the next step from there.